Shivam Sundaram to honor Swami's life and legacy. Today we'll begin from the second paragraph on page 62. Let's start with three Oms and Gayatri Mantra. Om. 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 भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Thank you. So Sister Nirza, you can start from paragraph 2.
College student who was present one evening when Baba ascended the hill on which the tamarind tree can still be seen writes, "The next day, Baba took us again to the sands. In fact, he was going out every day, sometimes to a top near Sahib Cheruvu, a tank on the other bank of the river, where he delighted in swimming and diving, or sometimes to the sands. After some little conversation, he challenged a few young men of his physical age, that is to say, some teenagers, to run a race with him up the rocky path from the sands to the tamarind tree. Off they went, but before one could just close one's eyes and open them, Baba was calling us in great glee from the very top. He asked the others to stop where they were and he called out to everyone, "Be watching me. I am giving you the darshan of Jyoti." Suddenly there was a great big ball of fire like the sun piercing that new moon dusk. It was impossible to open the eye and keep looking, but 3 or 4 of the devotees fainted and fell. The time was a little past 7. While mentioning the top near Sahib Chervu, another incident too might be recorded. One day, Baba had tied a swing to the overhanging branch of a tree there, and sitting on the contraption, he was swinging fast up and down in great joy, to the delight of all. Suddenly, he said, "Look," to the devotees sitting on the ground. They looked up and saw the charming cowherd boy of Vrindavan, sitting on a magnificently decorated, flower bedecked jhula. Then, too, some lost consciousness and had to be revived by Baba, scattering on them the akshata grains that he secured by a wave of the hand. While they woke up dazed and weeping with joy, Baba told them, "Calm yourselves, do not get excited. This is why I do not grant you any of these visions." Similarly, the Purohit of a family whose guest Baba was at Mysore was granted quite unexpectedly a vision of Narsimha, and the Sri Vaishnava Brahmin swooned and did not recover consciousness for several hours. A retired health inspector to whom Baba showed the Jyoti emanating from his forehead while talking about God and Godhead was so overcome with the strange splendor of the experience that he could not regain consciousness for full 70 hours. And his children began chiding Baba for taking him so near the door of death. A devotee from Kamalapuram was asking Baba to show him some miracle, and one day Baba called him and the members of his family, his mother and the rest, and offered to show them the Dashawataras, the 10 incarnations of Vishnu. Matsya, Kurma, and Varaha passed off without any incident. But when the terrible form of Narsimha appeared, they shrieked and yelled with fright, fearing that the house might collapse on their heads. They clamored, "Enough, enough," and Baba calmed down after Mangala Arati was performed by persons who, though they were there, did not see the forms because the miracle was not intended for them. The Dashavatara forms were vouchsafed to another gentleman, now deceased, a relative of the Karnam family. As a matter of fact, he passed away because his physical frame was too weak to contain the joy of the vision. Baba took him to the river and asked him to watch the reflection, his own reflection on the water. The man announced later that he saw at first Satya Sai Baba himself, then only the halo of hair that surrounds his head, and then all the 10 avatars in the order in which they are mentioned in the Puranas: the Kalaki avatar on horseback, and the form of Baba himself. One can well appreciate the hesitation of Baba to vouchsafe these visions when one remembers the case of Krishnamurti, a clerk at the Mysore Secretariat. Of course, Baba will bless only those who have reached that stage in which they deserve the vision that he grants. He is the judge of the time, the recipient, and the nature of the vision. And if the person so blessed is so overwhelmed with joy that he cannot survive in this physical framework, which is too weak a container for that type of bliss, one has only to be thankful for the glory and the blessedness of such a death. Baba was then at Bangalore, ostensibly a little boy of 17. He used to wear then a white half-armed shirt and a dhoti round his waist. The aforesaid Krishnamurti was a frequent visitor and an enthusiastic member of the bhajan group that sang the stotras. He was closely watching Baba and following him for a few days. Then one day at about 8 a.m., he confronted Baba and said rather excitedly, "I know you are God. Show me your real form." Baba tried to avoid him but couldn't. Then he gave him a picture of Shirdi Sai Baba, which he took on the spot, and directed him to meditate on that, keeping it against the wall. Be looking at the picture, he commanded, and left the house to give darshan to some bhaktas in their own home. Baba returned when the clock struck 12. Just when he crossed the threshold, Krishnamurti raised a huge cry of joy and fainted in the inner room. When he came to his senses, he was shivering and shaking and breathing heavily. He kept his eyes tightly closed, and he was pursuing Baba from room to room, asking sometimes plaintively, sometimes authoritatively, "Give me your pada, feet. Let me touch your feet." He seemed to know exactly where Baba was by the sense of smell, for he was sniffing his way towards him. But Baba pushed him gently off, or hid himself, or kept his feet firmly under him while he sat, and never acceded to his importunities. Swami distributing ambrosial honey. When Krishnamurti was asked to open his eyes, he refused, saying that he did not desire to cast his eyes on anything else. He wanted only to touch and see Baba's feet. His excitement and joy continued unabated for days, and Baba said that if he touched his feet while in that ecstatic mood, he would pass away. So Baba quietly persuaded him to go home, saying he would give him his darshan there, and himself shifted to a house in the civil station. But Krishnamurti could not contain himself. With his eyes still closed, he somehow sniffed his way. He boarded a jitka horse-drawn cart and directed the driver to the house where Baba was staying. He slid down from the jitka and ran into the compound. He roamed round the building and began to bang at the very window of the room where Baba was at the time. Baba still spoke of the danger to his life because of the overpowering joy of his experience. The man was dragged back home by his relations who came behind him. He was still keeping his eyes closed and praying for Baba's feet. He was taken to the hospital by some people, for he became weak through fasting and would not even drink water. Baba sent him at the hospital a little padatirtham, that is to say, water with which his feet had been washed, and when he drank it, he became fit enough to be taken home. At home, he asked everyone to do the bhajan, himself lying on a cot in the same room. When the bhajan was over, they found he did not rise. He had touched the feet of the Lord. The river had found the sea. What a highly evolved soul it must have been to deserve that unspeakable bliss. In later years, too, Baba has granted visions of Ishtadevatas and of his own manifold forms to many. These devotees cherish the memory of that moment of bliss. Baba has himself said often that the Lord has to come in human form in order to be understood by men, in order to speak to him in their own language, just as a person desirous of saving a drowning man has, perforce, to jump into the very same tank or well. No one can benefit from an avatar if the Lord comes down as he is with his effulgence unimpaired. On another occasion, he asked some persons he had come from Kamalapur whether they would like to hear the Murli Gana of Sri Krishna, and who would say no. He asked them to lay their heads on his chest, and lo, they could hear the enchanting melody of the flute of Krishna that brought even the Yamuna to a standstill. Ishwarama speaks of another thrilling experience when Baba said, "Listen, Shirdi Sai Ram is here." She and everyone in the room could hear steps advancing towards them, heavy, wooden sandaled steps. The steps ceased when they reached where Baba was sitting. It seemed when first the sound was heard, the mother asked with a little anger, "Who comes in with sandals on?" So real was the sensation, so true was the vision. While this is the experience of the mother, the father, Peda Venkapa Raju, had another incident to narrate. It seems one evening some people came from Penukonda to Puttaparthi. Among them was the old family friend, Sri Krishnamachari, who, though a native of Puttaparthi, had long ago settled down at Penukonda as a lawyer. He and the others came to the Karnam's house, and Srimati Subama gave them coffee, etc. The talk naturally turned on the latest phenomena of Satyanarayana Raju, and they asked Veda Venkapa Raju, who happened to be there, what it all was and how true it was. He replied that it was all a mystery to him, and that he too was equally in the dark. Then it seems the lawyer called Venkapa Raju a cheat and charged him with misleading innocent village folks with tall stories. This upset him so much that he went to where Baba was at the time and challenged him to convince the doubters about his divinity so that they might not attack him as the lawyer did. Baba coolly asked him to bring everyone who had any doubt direct to him. At this, Srimati Subamma and the Penukonda party were taken to Peda Venkapa Raju's house, where Baba was at the time. Baba asked Subamma if she would like to see the Shirdi Samadhi. And on her saying yes, he took her inside the house to an inner room and said, "Look." And lo, there she could see the samadhi with all the flowers, incense stick with smoke and fragrance complete, and an attendant sitting in one corner, murmuring some mantra to himself. Baba told her, "This side, see the Anjanya temple, and in the far distance, see that margosa tree." And it appeared to her as if she was in some vast open space looking at the scene in Shirdi, the entire landscape spreading out before her for miles to the horizon in distance. Swami showing the Shivalingam materialized within his body on Shivaratri. When she was brought out after this thrilling experience, she persuaded Sri Krishnamachari to follow Baba to the same inner room. Baba took them all in one by one and vouchsafed to each the same vision, a panoramic view of Samadhi at Shirdi and its locale. Paraju says that he was taken inside after all the rest, and when he came out, he was a changed man. His own doubts had vanished. The friends from Penukonda apologized for their slighting remarks and said that with a divine phenomena like Baba, the sanest remark for anyone would be that it was an understandably mysterious. They and Subama and Peda Venkaparaju were convinced that day that the little boy of 16 was really an incarnation of Baba. Peda Venkaparaju says that he instructed his family to consider Baba as divine and not bother him with any more littleness, neglect, or temper. Baba was engaged even during those early days in Upadesh. In fact, his life is one continuous Upadesh. A clear example of this is the Upadesham he gave to Digambra Swami when he came to Puttaparthi in 1941. The town of Bukkapatnam was all agog with the visit of this ascetic and aged man who had lost the use of both his legs, who had discarded dress, and therefore was looked upon by the masses as a triple example of sagehood. His admirers were eager to watch the reactions of Baba when pitted against a veteran of many hardships. The Digambara Swami had taken also a vow of silence, and so the curiosity of the people became greater. The sweet little divine child met the hefty hero who was carried to the village and deposited in front of the Karnam's house. Baba gave the unclothed sage a big towel and some advice, the like of which he would not have got anywhere else. If you have cut off relationship with society, as your nakedness indicates you have, then why do you not go to a cave in a forest away from human society? Why are you afraid? On the other hand, if you have a craving for disciples, for name and the food available in cities and towns, why do you allow yourself to be mistaken for a man with no attachment? These were the words that fell from the young Baba. They struck everyone with wonder and admiration. The Digambara Swami looked crestfallen, for he was evidently not sincere enough to act up to his nakedness and his monam. But Baba was not sarcastic. No, far from it. He was ready to help, to assure, to guarantee. He said, patting the cripple on the back, "I know your difficulty. You are afraid you may not get food and shelter if you retire from the company of men, isn't it? Well, I assure you, anyone taking the name of the Lord, wherever he may be, will get his food. I shall see to that. You may be in the deepest Himalayas or the thickest Dandakarnya, I shall give you food regularly there. But if you have not that faith and that courage, you can meditate on Him here itself. Then don't wander about naked and give all this bother to these people to carry you about from place to place." What a grand teaching that, if only people would grasp its meaning. That was the authentic voice. Only an avatar could give that assurance. While on this point, it is best to mention here that this assurance is being given even today by Baba to all sadhakas. 3 years ago, when Swami Sachidananda met him, Baba told him to cultivate his yogic proficiency and not fritter it away in the manifold activities of an organizing secretaryship. And he added, patting the 70-year-old sannyasin on the back, your yogic attainments will themselves penetrate the rock of the cave where you sit and bring auspiciousness to the world. Go to some Himalayan solitude. I shall provide you food and shelter wherever you are. The same authentic voice, the voice of the avatar, comes to guide and guard all sadhakas, whatever the religion, the race, the climb. With the arrival of devotees from all around at the news of the manifestation of Sai Baba at Puttaparthi, Baba was busy with the cure of their physical and mental ills. He says that even this forms part of his mission, for no one can have the urge for spiritual discipline when pestered by physical and mental ills. So, many cases of chronic illness, lunacy, hysteria, possession by evil spirits and ghosts, etc., were brought to the presence of the great healer. Persons who were worshipping Shirdi Baba also came out of curiosity to examine the new manifestation of their Lord. Many persuaded Baba to move to their places, and thus Baba went to Bangalore and visited a few houses, which had contacts with Mirzapur, Kolapuram, Pittapuram, Sandur, Madras, and other places. Some devotees came also from the Ursu families connected with the royal line of Mysore. At Bangalore, Baba operated a long standing case of duodenal ulcer, and the patient got complete relief. The instruments were all materialized mysteriously, and so the stream of pilgrims increased considerably. All these highlighted the need for a bigger mandir where Baba could reside and where the devotees could be accommodated. This was how the old mandir got planned by Tirumala Rao of Bangalore and others in 1945. The place selected was a little away from the village between the Sathyama and the Gopala Krishna temples, the very site on which sheds and pandals were put up since years during festivals by the Karnam family and other devotees. When the servant Guni Venkata, that is, Venkata with the hump, dug at the spot indicated by Baba so that the consecrated stones may be laid as foundation, a large number of stone pitams, bases of lingams turned up. But strangely, but strangely enough, dozens of pitams, but not even a single lingam. People gathered round Baba and sought the answer. Baba told them cryptically, pointing a finger at his stomach, the lingams are all here. Those who have witnessed the emanation of lingams from Baba's mouth on the night of every Mahashivaratri might be convinced of the correctness of the answer. Others will have to be satisfied with the consolation that the ways of the Lord are beyond the categories with which we measure and weigh and infer and judge. After the completion of the building, Baba came over from the Karnam's house and began residing in the room to the left of the front veranda, a small room about 8 feet long and 6 feet wide. Meanwhile, Baba had gone to Madras and given darshan to thousands there. He also went as far as Masulipatnam. Wherever he went, he granted people peace of mind and spiritual advice and assured them all that he would guide and guard them. One day, while on the sands of the seashore near Masulipatnam, Baba walked straight into the sea. The devotees took some time to realize the situation. Then they heard a voice and turned towards the waves. Then, lo, they saw a vision of Sheshashai, the Lord on the serpent Shesh, reclining on the waves. Within a moment, Baba was by their side. They were struck by the fact that his clothes were not wet at all. Swami Sivananda with Bhagwan Baba. Another day he walked towards the sea up to the very edge of the water and threw a silver cup far into the waves. Everyone wondered why, but in an instant the cup came back and deposited near them. Baba lifted it up along with the salt water it contained. He poured the water onto the palms of the bhaktas, a few drops for each, to be swallowed religiously, and lo, each one found it fragrant and sweet beyond compare. The sea had offered him Amrita, just as years later it placed round his feet a garland of pearls. Persons who witnessed these leelas and partook of the nectar are now at Prasanthi Nilayam, ardent devotees of Bhagavan. It would be a mistake to infer from these incidents that Baba was attempting to impress the people around him by the manifestation of his divinity. Being miraculous is of the very nature of the Lord. His actions are beyond our arithmetic and physics and chemistry. Plato called the inquiry into the nature of the relationship between the here and now and the hereafter and ever as metaphysics or afterphysics. Baba's actions are all meta. He vouchsafes the miracles because he is he, not because of any desire or purpose or want. For what can he ever want or wish? Whenever any person came into the presence, even in those days, Baba immediately took him in hand and by advice, suggestion, satire, sarcasm, or even downright reprimand, he slowly shaped him into a humble, silent, pious, but withal efficient, enthusiastic limb of society. That is the alchemy of his touch. Even when he addressed groups of devotees, he harped on the need for the inner transformation. He told everyone to have courage and said that courage can come only by faith in the infinite power, the infinite mercy of the Lord. Of course, anyone inclined to doubt need only approach him and taste his infinite power and his infinite mercy.
Thank you, Sister Nirsa. Sister Vani, you can continue from here.
Sairam. Talking of his Karuna, an incident that happened at Bangalore while he was yet in his teens occurs to mind. A cobbler playing his trade in a corner of a road in the civil station saw Baba in a bungalow opposite the place where he sat. Many cars were moving into the house and coming out. Flowers and fruits were being taken in, and the faces of those that came out on the road were bright with joy and contentment. They were talking of an avatar, of Sri Krishna, of Bhagwan, of Baba, etc. So he too ventured to enter the gate and peep nervously into the hall where Baba was seated on a special chair, with men on one side and the women on the other. His eyes fell on Baba. Just when he too looked at him, Baba rose up immediately and came forward to the very door where he stood. He approached him, took the little dried up garland and that the cobbler held in his hand, even before the man offered it, and he asked him in Tamil what he wanted from him. The temerity of to formulate his wish and express it in so many words must have been granted to that aged cobbler by Baba himself. For how else can we explain the astounding request that he dared to make? He said quite confidently and without hesitation, to the surprise of everyone who heard him, "Please come to my house also and accept something." Baba patted his back lovingly and said, "All right, I shall come." and resumed his seat at the other end of the hall. Swami Purushothamananda with Bhagwan. The cobbler waited long because he wanted to tell Baba where his house was and he wanted to know when Baba would visit it so that he might clean it and be ready to receive him. But he had to hurry back to his corner to keep watch over his bag of leather pieces and old shoes. He was pushed and jostled by the rush of visitors. No one listened to him when he said that Baba had promised to pay a visit to his hut and he wanted them to find out from him when he would be coming. Some laughed at him and his audacity. Some said he was drunk or mad. Days passed. Baba spent his days with other bhaktas and did not visit the bungalow opposite to the cobbler's corner. He gave up all hope of meeting Baba again. Suddenly, one day, a swelp car pulled up right in front of the aged fellow. He was taken aback. He was afraid it might be the police van or some corporation officer intent on prosecuting him. But it was Baba. He invited the cobbler to get into the car. The man was too confused even to open his mouth to direct the driver to his hut. But Baba seemed to know. Stopping the car on the side of the road, he got down and hastened over the cobblestones in the side lane to the exact hut in the midst of a number of slum dwellings. The cobbler ran forward to warn his family. Baba took some sweets and fruits and gave them as prasad to the members of the cobbler's family and sat on a plank near the wall. He blessed the aged man who was shedding tears of joy, partook of a few plantains that he brought from a shop nearby, and left the hut, which he had made his visit a place of pilgrimage for the entire neighborhood. Such was Baba's prema. But some, in their foolishness, attempted even to poison Baba. Since the incident reveals more than one fact about Baba's divinity, it is best to relate it in some detail. Even today, Baba will not allow the attempt to be called an attempt to kill, and since his words are truth, we shall repeat that it was just an attempt to test whether he could survive the eating of the poison. It was more the result of skepticism that was wickedness. It was a festival day, and Baba visited a few houses in his native village with two devotees. In each house, he partook of something or the other when he entered the house where the fatal food was ready. He showed extra enthusiasm and demanded more of the stuff, and saw to it that his companions did not consume the deadly mixture. When he returned to the Karnam's house, he confided to some persons the secret of the special invitation from the particular house and talked about the utter futility and foolishness of it all, and he had a hearty laugh over the incident. After some time, he vomited the whole stuff. Persons near him secretly tested whether it was poisonous to living beings or not. It was. In fact, Baba takes delight in doing just what we mortals dread to do. For example, the night of the snake bite. This incident is described in the chapter on the wave of the hand. That night, after the recovery of Baba with the applications of the talisman produced miraculously through his grace, everyone in the village pleaded with him not to have any supper, for food might aggravate the poison. But he audaciously ate a little more than usual. They warned him against sleep, not knowing that his sleep was similar to the Nidra Mudra that is devoted to the vigilant protection of the world. But he slept longer than usual. Next morning, he was asked by the elders to avoid cold water, but he purposely dived into the well and swam about just to spite human nervousness and human precautions. In spite of these constant reminders of his divinity, we drag the height to our open depths and circumscribe the supreme illogical into a cramped but symmetric syllogism. An incessant flow of vibhuti from an empty vessel. Subbamma was the person most anxious about his health and most worried about the hundreds of pilgrims who gathered at Puttaparthi. Baba even now says that the grinding stone in her house was always busy, preparing chutney out of the heaps of coconuts that the pilgrims offered. Subbamma was grinding and grinding and grinding, almost 8 hours of the day. She had immense love and devotion to the Lord, and Baba had said that he would satisfy her one desire, to have darshan of Baba in her last moments. It is indeed a thrilling story, the story of those moments and that darshan. Subbamma fell ill. She was taken to Bukkapatnam, but in spite of her illness, she came over one day in a bullock cart to see Prashanti Nilayam, which was then under construction. She was soon bedridden. She could not move. Her condition worsened, and Baba was away at Bangalore. Subbamma, in her delirium, talked about Baba and the vision of Shirdi Sai Baba, which she had been privileged to see, of the manifold Leelas of Krishna she had witnessed. And when she came to her senses, her talk was about the same incidents and the same person. She was in the midst of relatives who did not have much sympathy with these sentiments, for they felt that her love for the strange little miraculous boy had taken her away from attachment to her kith and kin, and so they told her that her Baba was 100 miles away, and therefore it could be better for her to concentrate her failing attention on men and matters nearer and closer. But her faith did not falter. Meanwhile, Baba left Bangalore for Tirupati, where he spent some time with the devotees of his own concretized and consecrated image. Of course, Baba knew that Subbamma's soul was struggling to free itself from the mortal coil, and that was rolling in her deathbed, and that she was rolling in her deathbed at Bukkapatnam. The people around her announced that she had breathed her last, but some peculiar glow on her face made them nervous to take the body to the cremation ground. A few wiser persons shook their heads when it was suggested that she had died. They advised patience and admonished the relatives. The bird has not flown yet, they said. How could that bird fly even though the door of the cage was lying open? She must have the darshan and she must wait until Baba comes. And Baba too was hurrying towards her bedside. He left Tirupati by car and, arriving at Puttaparthi, proceeded to Bukkapatnam 3 full days after the first announcement of Subbamma's end. Her eyes had lost the glint. She was placed on the floor, and people were evincing an uneasy impatience. Baba sat by her side and in a low voice called Subbamma, Subbamma, just twice and no more. Then, to the wonderment of everyone crowding around, Subbamma opened her eyes, her hand extended towards Baba, and grasped his palm firmly and began to stroke it lovingly. Baba put his fingers to her lips. Her mouth opened a little, as if she knew that Baba was giving her something to slake the thirst of the soul. From the fingers of Baba, there poured into her mouth the immortal Ganga, and Subbamma joined the ranks of the released. About this time, Baba was approached by some Muslims of the neighboring village on a matter of some importance for them. Their ranks were reduced by a fell disease. The worship of what are called purs is traditional in these parts during the month of Mohura. The installation, the worship, the ceremonial procession, and the immersion, all being celebrated by the Hindu as well as the Muslim communities. Purs are the hand-shaped objects made of brass, etc., which are held sacred and mementos of the sacrifice of Hassan and Hussein on the memorable battlefield of Karbala. Baba told the Muslims who came to him that purs were being installed in their village since hundreds of years, but lately the ceremony had stopped. He asked them to continue the worship and revealed to them that if they could dig at a certain place which he pointed out, they would get the very purs which their forefathers consecrated. They dug at the place, and the pearls were exposed to view. Everyone was so surprised at Baba's omniscience and the sudden appearance of the sacred objects that none had the courage to descend and pull them into the open. So Baba himself got down the pit and took the pearls out. There were 4 of them at the place. For many years thereafter, these were kept at the mandir itself, rolled up in a mat and packed neatly. They were issued to those villagers for the Muharram celebration only, and they were duly returned after the functions were over. One curious circumstance that was witnessed by the present writer may be added here. When the Muslims were once proceeding from the mandir, after accepting the purse from Baba's hands, the person who carried them began to act as if he was possessed, and all began to gather around him to watch the holy man in that elevated mood. He danced a few steps, ran round in circles, muttered a few verses of the Holy Quran to himself, and walked back to where Baba was. Then Baba said, "Go, go, and come back after the festival." And quietly the possessed man sped forward with the purse in the same tense condition of prayerful joy. Only those who have had the privilege of experiencing such moments can grasp an iota of the mystery that is Baba. Origin of Man, tiny model of monkey created by Baba. Many devotees came to Puttaparthi during those days from far and near. Each one was drawn from his place by some inexplicable circumstances and kept loyal by some glimpse of Baba's omniscience or omnipresence or omnipotence. A gentleman from Udumapalat, who first refused to join the party of pilgrims but was later persuaded to join, offered a flower garland to Baba as soon as Puttaparthi was reached, as everyone else did, but Baba did not accept his offering. He said, "You had no mind to come," and that remark bound him closer to the unbeliever. Another gentleman from Madurai came because his sister at Velur accepted to have an operation performed on her only if and when Baba agreed it was essential. He came to Puttaparthi, but Baba did not speak to him for some days. And when at last he spoke, he only asked him to go back to Velur by the next available bus. The doctor at Velur was getting more and more furious because the silly patient was endangering her own life, waiting for a hukum from a boy who she said was her guru and god. The brother came at last. Another examination was made, and wonder of wonders, there was no need for an operation. Is it the same she? The doctor rubbed his eyes. It would make very inspiring reading if a book is composed of the answers from the devotees to the question, "How did you first come to Puttaparthi and why?" If such a volume is ever produced, the story of the coming of Srimati Sakama, the famous coffee planter and philanthropist of Hoog, the lady who was honored with the title of Dharmaparayani by the Maharaja of Mysore, will be an interesting chapter. Not that she was rich and famous in the field of business and industry. Oh no, Baba does not mind a person being rich nor being poor. He cares for the richness of character, the wealth of sadhana, the treasures of the spirit, whatever the bank balance. The late Srimati Sakama used to tell this strange story that she experienced one day at her own bungalow in Somawarpat, Coorg, where she was engaged in worship. A servant disturbed her and announced that a car had come into the compound and that the person inside insisted on seeing her immediately. She was rather upset, but nevertheless went out to find who could take so much liberty with her timetable. She found in the car a tall, fair old man with a very reverend beard sitting on a deerskin, his whole body bathed in ash. And she was struck by the age of the car too, for it matched the age of the owner or occupant. The car was driven by a weak little boy in his teens, and Srimati Sakama wondered how he could have managed to secure a license or whether he had one at all. The car had a nameplate on top in front, the Kailash Committee. She invited the old man inside, did pranam, placed a newly plucked rose at his feet, and offered him some fruits. He said that he would not eat the fruits there. He said he did not cater to the tongue at all times and at all places. Jivachapalya was the word he used. He wanted her to contribute to the Kailash committee and become a member by giving the donation of 1,000 rupees. She signed a paper in which the sum and her name was already written. When she proffered the amount, the old man said, "Keep this also with you. I shall come and take it later." With those words, he kept on the table the signed sheet, and getting into the car, he left the place. The teenage driver did his work remarkably well, for the car was out of sight in a moment. Years later, when she saw Bawa in a house to which she had gone, he appeared to her at one moment like the driver of that mysterious car, and the next like the heroic occupant who took so much pains to make her contribute to the Kailash committee, and then asked her to wait with the cash in her own keeping. And then Baba surprised her by telling her, "Come on, give the rupees 1,000 you promised that day," and describing in her presence the entire story, correct to the minutest detail. Baba went to Mysore city during the Deepavali festival once and stayed with an Ursu devotee. While there, he granted the devotees at Puttaparthi the vision of a Naga, a phenomenon not unknown to the devotees of Shridi Rupa form, also as the citizens of Coimbatore and of many other places can confirm. The interesting fact about this vision is that at the same time, or rather, for the entire period that it lasted, Baba was outside his physical frame, which was at Mysore. The bhajan at the old mandir was done during the absence of Baba before a temporary shrine on the steps leading to the front door, where a photo was kept decorated. With the pair of lamps which burned both day and night, Deepavali night passed off, and the early dawn, some devotees at Puttaparthi saw the lights of a car coming up the curve of the hill beyond Karnataka Jepalli. But that was later found to be just an impression of a few. When the persons who saw the light and ran forward to the river bank returned to the mandir, they were surprised to hear that a cobra had coiled round the portrait of Baba in the temporary shrine. It was seen by hundreds of villagers and others until 3 p.m. They offered puja to it, sang the regular bhajan at noon, and broke coconuts to propitiate it. But it did not stir out of its place. Emboldened by this, some women threw kumkum and saffron powder on it, pronouncing the name of the Lord and calling upon Baba. They placed milk in bowls before it. It only swayed, it raised hood from the side to side. One venerable woman of the village, when the two halves of the coconut were given back to her after the ceremonial offering, protested loudly, saying that the nut she handed in was definitely bigger in size, and that she would be a loser if she quietly accepted the halves of a smaller nut. At this, the cobra, as if it was keenly watching the proceedings, turned sharply in her direction and hissed loudly. Everyone had a hearty laugh at her fright. At 3 p.m., the cobra slid down and within a yard or two became invisible. And Baba at Mysore brought joy to all getting up. Chinkoli Palace, Tonga, used by Shirdi Sai Baba, now kept in Chaitanya Jyoti Museum at Prashanti Nilaya. Just as Baba went to Mysore, he visited also Hyderabad, and since he recognized a number of places as those which he had once seen, the Rani of Chinkoli got convinced that he was the avatar of Shirdi Baba himself. Baba also went to Kuppam, and from there to Karur and Trichinopoly. Everywhere he was welcomed with great enthusiasm by the devotees and citizens. At Trichinopoly, the procession was led by a richly caparisoned elephant, followed by parties reciting Vedic mantras and carrying in silver pots consecrated water as an offering of homage. Everywhere he advised the people, from now onwards, purify your hearts and make them fit tabernacles for the Lord. Do not fall deeper and deeper into evil, yielding to temptations. Take courage. Believe in the Lord who is within you. He is your thickest and nearest kith and kin. While the cars of Baba's party were going along the streets of Trichinopoly, one of the vehicles ran over a little boy and he was badly injured. A crowd collected around the boy, who was laid bleeding and hurt on the veranda of a house nearby, and the police popped up to investigate. But meanwhile, Baba had come and touched the boy. So when the police came, they had nothing to report, for the boy who was hurt was running about telling everyone how one touch had made him whole. Long after Baba left, that boy was fondled and fed by an admiring crowd who envied him for his miraculous experience. There was another boy too, who was similarly honored by an admiring crowd and who perhaps even today is thankful to the Lord of intervention in his career. At a public meeting near Trichinopoly held to honor Baba, someone doubted the divinity of Baba and sensing this from the platform. Baba immediately called up a deaf and a dumb lad who was standing near the aforesaid person and making him stand in front of the mic. He asked him, "What is your name?" Immediately the boy spoke into the mic for all thousands to hear, "Venkata Narayan." The doubter swallowed his tongue and hung his head in shame. But there was another consequence too. Baba often talks about this incident with laughter, for when morning dawned, the entire length of the street where he was residing was packed with the dumb and deaf. It had become a silent lane of pain. No one knew till then that Trichinopoli has such a large population of the particular brand of handicapped. Baba had to move out of the bungalow through a side exit in order to avoid the clamor of the relatives. The devotees at Karur and Trichinopalli vied with each other in decorating their houses and streets and in the magnificence of reception arrangements. But Baba was unaffected by all the pageantry. He moved freely among the people, both rich and poor, sometimes more among the poor than among his hosts, for he cares more for the prayerful heart and the heart filled with remorse than those puffed with pride and contaminated by greed. The mandapams bedecked with flowers of variegated hue, which were erected for seating him and offering worship to him, were gems of artistry. But Baba told the people times without number that he attached value only to the unsullied blossom of a pure heart and the fruit offerings of good deeds, the Hridaya Pushpa and the Karma Pala, as he says. Once at Mysore, seated on one such mandapam, Baba was receiving the puja of an Urusu devotee when a cobra appeared from nowhere and crept onto the heap of flowers at his feet. Presently, it was accompanied by another, and the two took up positions on both sides of the mandapa. Baba assured the members of the Urusu family that there was nothing to be afraid of, and after a while, the cobras disappeared into the nowhere from which they emerged. Baba is not content merely by instilling faith in his devotees through his miracles. He is a hard taskmaster who will be satisfied with nothing less than 10% integrity and a sincere striving for the spiritual discipline. This explains why, of the very large number of men and women who are drawn to him by the stories of his miracles and who get their first impressions of his divinity, confirmed many subsequent miracles, fall away from him, unable to cope with his demands. He makes in character reform, renunciation, sadhana, japa, and dhyana. Baba reiterated even those early days that he wards off physical calamities, curses bodily ills, heals, consoles, and gives solace only as a first step towards sadhana, which must automatically follow his darshan. Many a sadhu and maharishi have fallen into the mire because of their anxiety to keep themselves in the good books of rich and influential patrons. But Baba, who has come to illuminate the paths of sadhus and maharishis, has never minced matters when it comes to correcting the faults of those around him. In fact, his grace is so overpowering that it disregards the obstacles of age, scholarship, or length of association. He blesses everyone with his correction and evaluation. Complete resignation to his will alone can make each one full and free. Dasra soon became the festival par excellence at Puttaparthi. For while Baba might be away at Madras or Trichinopalli or Mauslipatnam for other festivals, he was invariably at the Mandiram for Dasra. Srimati Sakkamma and other devotees were privileged for many years to make arrangements for this festival of the mother. Baba is indeed the Supreme Mother, manifesting himself as Saraswati, Lakshmi, Sharada, Annapurna, and even Kali. Baba has said that Sanatana Dharma is the divine mother of humanity. With his message of Satya, Dharma, Shanti, and Prema, the four cardinal principles of that Dharma, he himself, the mother, the Sanatana Sarathi, his devotees feel that he is their mother more than all, and so there is a special appropriateness in Dasra, being the biggest festival at Puttaparthi. Many among his bhaktas have been blessed with visions of him as the mother. In fact, one of them insists on addressing him as Shivatai, Shiva and Mother. He likes the company of children. Even the most recalcitrant is brought round by him through an inexhaustible repertoire of tricks, games, ventriloquial achievements, shadow figures, and even presents of sweets materialized by a wave of the hand. He twists and turns his fingers, and lo, when the shadow falls on the bare wall opposite, the children are astonished to find snakes, eagles, horses, stags, dogs, peacocks, crows, cats, and buffaloes jumping about in high glee. He offers the child a ball of sand. It reluctantly extends its tiny hand to receive the laddu, as he calls it. The sand actually becomes sweet, fragrant laddu the moment it reaches the palm of the child. He says that children are indeed lucky, since they have the good fortune of Baba's darshan much earlier than adults, and they are privileged to have Baba as their teacher, protector, guide, and guardian for many decades to come. When Baba agrees to name the children of his devotees, the names he gives them are redolent of his grace and his mercy. He also initiates the little ones in Akshara, that is, he holds their tiny fingers in his hand and scribbles along with them in honey or milk or rice the letters of the alphabet. But Akshara means all the imperishable, the eternal, and Baba, when he inaugurates the Aksharabhyasa, initiates them also into the imperishable, for he makes the child pronounce the Mahamantra Om Namo Narayana, O Om Namo Shivaya, O Om Srinivasaya, or anyone of such suited to the tradition of the family of the child, thus giving the child the key to ultimate spiritual destiny. There is a Tamil song on Baba which refers to him as the Sai Mata, the mother who suckles her children on the milk of jnana, and the Aksharabhyasa is the occasion on which the fortunate child gets a chance. Should I continue, sister?
No. Thank you, Sister Nirja and Sister Vani, for the beautiful rendition. We will now end the reading with Sai Gayatri and Samastaloka. Om साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात् ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात् ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वप्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति